Hello and welcome to the Voice of Reason Quarantine podcast. I hope you guys are safe and keeping your distance from actual human beings. And what I'm doing right now is providing you some virtual human beings to occupy yourselves with and delay your stir craziness for the time being, at least. Today's guest is Claire Graham, who I have had on my channel before to speak about intersex issues and their intersection, or how they've been kind of co-opted by certain strains of trans rights activism. But Claire reached out to me after I posted a a video on Twitter about Belinda Brown, who I interviewed and posted yesterday. And I actually spoke with Claire first, but I wanted to get Belinda's interview out there and just proceed orderly. You know, I'm trying to cue like the British do. That's what I'm really trying to do. So Claire also has some problems with the groupthink specifically within feminism, and she wanted to kind of hash that out and think about what causes somebody to want to be really independent, what causes somebody to really want to plug into a belief system and you know, aggregate their oppression with a bunch of other people. Not to denigrate actual oppression in the world, but what is it about these social movements that appeal to certain people and really turn off other people? So Claire, great human being. We had a good time. So here we go. I'm going to keep on pumping out a whole lot of content because I'm on furlough now. I lost my other job for the next 6 weeks. And so it's just me and you now. It's just me and you. So get your can of beans and a comfortable spork, lean back, and let's listen together.
The reason I messaged you was about the tweet about the woman. She's at Speaker's Corner in London.
Yeah. Could you tell us what the Speaker's Corner is? This sounds like an institution over there. It's like an important spot, right?
It's oh God, this is where it's gonna turn out that I don't really know anything. It's a place in a park in London where kind of anyone can go and you can get on a soapbox and just talk about whatever's important to you or whatever you want people to hear you speak about. And in the feminist, like gender critical feminist side of things, it's quite important because it's where the Maria McLaughlin assault took place. Women met there. It's over 2 years ago now, isn't it?
Okay.
Is it 3 years ago? Women met there. It was like the first meeting where they were ever going to discuss like the changes to the Gender Recognition Act, and trans activists came along and assaulted Maria McLaughlin. So it's become like it's always been a place here where people go and get on their soapboxes and talk about whatever. But it's become like a significant place now in the history of this.
Yeah, that's like the flashpoint of this current back and forth between the gender critical group and the trans rights activists, where we see a consistent pattern of behavior. Even just a couple days ago, a bunch of trans rights activists threw smoke bombs at a gender critical meeting of some sort.
Yeah, that was pretty awful. Not just, I mean, throwing the smoke bombs would have been bad enough, but do you know the area where that happened? There was a tower block about over a year ago that caught fire, and it was at night and people were trapped in there and died. It was a really big major incident. Like the tower block's still there, it's just a burnt out shell, and it happened like the meeting was happening within the vicinity of that, and the trans activists went and threw smoke bombs. So it wasn't just about them doing it to that meeting, it was the lack of thought for where they were, and the people there are very traumatized by what happened. A lot of people lost their lives.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
But that's a consistent pattern of behavior with the trans rights activists, like openly assaulting the gender critical feminists in the flesh, at the meetings, going there, banging on walls, showing up in fetish gear, and being thoroughly
It's really bizarre. So bizarre to show up in your fetish gear to protest.
With your wanker hanging out, you know, or whatever the British term is.
Such an I don't even know. I don't know who you're trying to win over with that look either. Do you know, like?
It's a very narrow appeal, but maybe it's a very strong appeal. It turns into something.
Yeah.
Huh.
But yeah,
so
sorry, go on.
No, please.
I was going to say it's happened. It's quite bizarre, the meetings here, because there is a history of quite a lot of aggression towards women's meetings, but equally there are some that have happened where there hasn't been all the ones I've been to. There's never been a protester. I don't know. I don't know why that is. It just seems to depend. I don't maybe on who's speaking or like where it is. I don't know, but I haven't witnessed any firsthand. But I know it's happened quite a lot of the meetings.
Yeah, the outliers always kind of take up the brunt of the attention for everything, both within and that's part of the reason why. I mean, it was a risky post to post that video, but somebody who's a feminist sent me that video and said, this is the stuff that I don't like in my movement. Like, this woman is speaking out. And what Belinda said at Speaker's Corners, she called out a certain tendency within feminism to be man-hating or to focus negatively on men over and over and over again, like just a pattern, a rhetorical pattern. And that might actually be a detriment to the cause if men feel like they're going to show up and just have to shoulder a bunch of negativity. Though while I say that, I still understand why it's there. I still understand that women are speaking from a space of trying to overcome and repair and gain equality and overcome subjugation and oppression. And there's a lot there. There's a lot of real stories there. At the same time, my main focus and my main enemy, wherever I find it, even in myself, and I fail constantly, is rigid orthodoxy, is rigid group thinking. And that appears over and over and over again, no matter what the movement is. So that was an opportunity for me to, and maybe it's not my job to do that, and I understand that there could be a lot of criticism appended to me, but there wasn't in that tweet, pointing out like some self-reflection on the part of feminists to look inward at their movement. And that tweet has actually sparked a lot of different discussion from a lot of different people with a lot of different views.
I don't think it's an unfair criticism. I think like everything, or like feminism's quite broad, isn't it? There's lots of different types of feminism, which is one of the problems with the trans debate as well, because you have liberal feminism versus radical feminism, but they're not the only two kinds either. And not that I'm an expert on any form of it really, but I think it's a fair criticism that it can become quite man-hatey. I think I've seen it. I was at a meeting. It was about dysphoric children, trans children, last year, and there was a guy there who's worked in the field and has spoken out quite publicly. He's very important to the cause in the fight to get what's happening with dysphoric children looked at. And there was a Q&A session. He wasn't so much asking a question as addressing a point. Someone had sort of done the like, where are the men thing, and he'd sort of said, it was unfortunate. He was going to say, a lot of men don't know what's happening, and so that's why they're not in this conversation. And he wasn't using it as an excuse, but kind of, like, but if you don't know, then you're not going to talk about it. And unfortunately, he started his sentence with "not all men," and he was immediately shouted down by a room full of. One woman put her hand over his mouth. It was really it was quite awful. It was quite. And I felt really uncomfortable because he's not the enemy. He's there. Especially within the context of that day, he's a really sort of key player in us understanding what's happening and fighting that. And just because he inadvertently used the phrase "not all men," and not in a "not all men" way either, not meaning it in that way, it was just ridiculous that he then was not allowed to speak because a room full of women were offended by those three words.
I don't know why, but it seems like certain keyboard warrior type feminists jump on phrases if it's really activated by keywords, like if a keyword shows up, there's like this reaction to it. Like I put the word rational in a tweet having to do with me and women, and it was that word, even though like I tried to contextualize, it was that word that they had the problem with. Or I've seen a lot of arguing against stereotypes or saying like like she deserved it, like projecting these very cliche phrases as the point of contention rather than allowing discourse to, use terms in a different context. I don't know why that is, but I've seen that pattern.
Is it just
Frequently.
identity politics, though? Feminism is as open to becoming like that as anything else. I think feminism can serve a purpose. Like you say, like women have always faced a battle for equality, and to have like a movement that focuses on those things is important. But you can move beyond that, can't you, then, to like that sort of identity politics type thing, which is always like us and them. And the sort of collective narcissism within that, I think.
Yeah, it's really difficult. I wonder how to resist that. Like, how do activist groups of any stripe resist that way of converging on, an enemy, in order to enact their, there's a lot of different things going on when a group gets together to act, but you have to resist that in order to not get the stigma of, the negative parts of the party. Like with progressivism in the United States, it's the total woke lefty extremists that stain the entire project of leftism over here. And how do you suss those out? How do you distance yourselves from the people who act that way, or how do you put that down on a group level?
I don't know. I think you just have to always be open to critical thinking, don't you? But then that's really individual. You can't. I don't know how you advise someone to do that, other than saying that's what you have to do. You can't. Like I hadn't, until I got involved in the gender stuff, I hadn't had much to do with feminism, and not because I disagree with it, not because I don't think women should have equality or shouldn't face like sex-based discrimination, or that there aren't issues that women have. But then a lot of them aren't issues that I have, because I have a different body as well. So a lot of like discussions around abortion or things like that, I don't get involved because it's never going to be something that I will experience, and I don't really know how to like tackle that then. So I've been like more involved in feminist discussions since getting involved in the gender stuff, and it is really easy. You could really easily get taken down that sort of, it's the patriarchy and like all men are against us, because that's like you're constantly sort of fed that. But I became, I got involved in the gender stuff because I was critically thinking about the social justice things that I was involved in and how I didn't agree with those. And then like I've just done the same with feminism, I think, or I like to think I have anyway. I don't know. I like maybe I'm not. Maybe I have been indoctrinated, but I don't think I have, because I think I'm still able to criticize like where I don't agree.
Mm-hmm. What social justice stuff were you involved in, or that woke you up to?
I was just critical? More of that. I grew up in like a very left-wing area, and so we were sort of spoon-fed socialism from a very early age and things like that. And then from that, you get involved in protesting things, and that was just kind of the world that I was in. And so a lot of the people now who I disagree with on the trans politics, I was in their camp for sort of everything for a long time, because that's just it's like the political leanings I was raised with was that sort of left. And I don't. There's still things I would agree with them on, but there's a lot that I disagree with them on.
What was the first moment where you began to become critical of a certain part of leftism, or a certain part of that social justice culture that you were in?
Oh, it was like the trans women's rights things. It was when I heard like people on the left talking about people like me and using that in arguments about other people's identities. And that was where I felt really uncomfortable. And then once I spoke out about it and I was labelled a TERF and a bigot, that's then the end of it. That was kind of, that sort of opened my eyes then to this whole thing, like the pylons on social media and things as well. And that like the sort of the us and them, and how quickly you are them when you have a different opinion.
Yeah. Do you feel in this journey that you've taken that you've was it a crisis when you saw that was focused on you, that you were kind of, there were steps towards overtures of an exile, for you? Was it a loss of faith, or was it kind of a different
Not really, because I don't
process?
think I changed. I don't think, I think the way I see things is still the same. I think I just suddenly disagreed with people that I'd agreed with on a lot of stuff. Like everyone's like, and they didn't like it. But I don't think I don't think my values or who I am as a person changed. So it wasn't really.
Okay.
It told me more about them than it did about me, I would say.
And with what happened in a few months ago in Britain, where Labour lost, and it seemed like it was because of some social justicey, or the negative aspects of highly politically correct progressivism, was kind of refused by the voting bloc. And then a few weeks ago, Labour put out this really odd statement, and I'm going to probably botch it, but they had this statement that said that we're going to exile people who disagree with trans rights,
Yeah,
or
the
something like that.
transphobes. Yeah.
We're gonna like purge our party of transphobes.
Yeah, it's a massive mistake on their part. Like I say, where I grew up is really socialist. There are areas around where I grew up that have been Labour forever, who lost, and Labour lost their seat there in the last election. And it's, they're working class, very poor areas. People have the very high need areas. People have a lot of issues, and they're issues that aren't going to be addressed by pronouns in your Twitter bio. They're not, no one cares. It means nothing to them, and not that they wouldn't be supportive of trans rights or whatever, but it's just not. When that's, and even now the leadership for the Labour Party, the current contest for that, all the discussion is about these issues that really are non-issues to a lot of people. And meanwhile, in the UK, we have, obviously because of the welfare state, we have people who are very dependent on government funding and things. And they changed a few years ago, how people with disabilities are assessed for welfare. And there are people who are dying as a result of these changes. And you never see that talked about. You never see the left and the progressives talk about these people who are actually dying because of paperwork. Instead, they're talking about gender recognition reform and pronouns and people's identities. And, they're not really... I'm sure they're real problems to the people who say that they're problems for them, but they're not problems for a lot of other people.
It just seems like somehow the group, and it kind of has happened over here in America too, the group that is nominally about the working class and about helping the poor and the disenfranchised is run by an elite that has huffed some sort of glue that has made them obsessed about things that are not connected at all to the bulk of the people that they're supposed to represent.
I wonder if it's just partly because it's easier in the world of social media, just tweeting trans women are women, trans men are men, non-binary people are valid. How easy is that? And then you've done your bit for the cause, and that's all it takes. And I genuinely think there is a lot of that about it. And so, we're in an era where sound bites are, because memes and things. It's just so easy, isn't it?
Yeah. No, I've been thinking about that, with my Twitter feed, and the feelings that I get when I expose myself to too much social media, and the negativity that's involved in a lot of it, and the way that if I make a negative statement, it makes a lot more splash than if I make something that's just offhanded joke or a positive statement or something like that. It's very easy to obsess about these very trivial matters, or to take really big, complex issues and to perform that I'm caring about them by distilling them into something that is in and of itself is a frivolous statement. And I'm reading a book right now that I received a advanced copy of by I'm going to have to put that in later in the description, but it's about ROGD females. It's about rapid onset gender dysphoric females, and I'm just a little bit into it, but it seems like the author's pointing out the the effect that the internet has had on the youth. And a number of different writers, Haidt and Twenge, have written about the effect of social media on the youth. And I really think that it's embarrassing for us adults to admit how we've been captured by it too. And it's not just the kids that are running overboard with these weird ideas, but it's also us constantly.
Well, we're all still, because this technology is so new, isn't it? You know, in the grand scheme of things. So we're all sort of babies with it in the end, because we're all finding our way with it. I know here it's been, you know, because we have like the defamation laws and things here, and also, I mean, like we've had cases obviously here about hate crime and online activity and things, and it's that thing where like the law isn't even up to date with where we're at with this technology. Like it's so in its infancy, and yeah, I think adults are just as bad as kids for that we don't know what we're doing either. We haven't worked it out, and it's a new. I think you talked about this. You did an interview with I don't know what's it called, Ladyboy.
Oh yeah. I still don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I just feel so bad to call someone that. But yeah, you like had the sort of virtual world, and that's what online is as well, isn't it? And we still don't know how to handle that. And the thing that anyone can be what they say they are online, or anyone can present themselves in any way. It's a completely like false world that we have.
Yeah, there is no biological sex online. It's all gender. It's all a construct. It's all social. It's just sentences and images and lights and sounds. So you can be whoever you want to be, but that instead of that making us obsessed more and more with the quality of somebody's character, it's made us obsessed more and more with the layer of somebody's identity, which is a totally frivolous construct. Anyway.
Yeah, it's all just. It reminds me of what was that computer game? There's a documentary about it, Life 2.0 or something. I don't know if that's...
Yeah. What's it called? It's something, Second Life, I think.
Second Life, yeah. And there were people who completely sort of lived in their Second Life world, didn't they? And then like they ended their marriages to be with someone in like the Second Life world. And I think it's that, isn't it? Like that is now everyone's online. Like we're all someone else online.
And so the question is, how do we anchor ourselves in real life issues and use the technology to forward our agendas, like our legitimate agendas? And you do work online a lot to raise awareness about intersex issues and distinguish it from what it's being used for. How have you modified your behavior to be more effective in forwarding knowledge in that area? Domain?
I don't know. I don't know if I have. No, I don't know if I have modified my behavior.
Have you been content that you've made some sort of forward motion with that, or had an effect?
Yeah, I think so. I think I set out just with an opinion, which is my opinion about me, and then because of the discussions I got involved in, I started to learn more and then disseminate what I'd learned. Which I suppose that's the modification of my online behaviour. I wasn't doing that before. I was just someone with an opinion, and then suddenly I was someone who was looked to educate. Although that's my job in the real world, so maybe it shouldn't have been. Maybe it's not that different. So. And that's the thing. I don't don't get me wrong. I don't think like the internet is a bad thing. I think it's really useful, and I wouldn't be talking to you right now if it. Yeah,
I wouldn't exist. In my current capacity.
Exactly. Yeah.
Without it.
I wouldn't be, and I wouldn't be doing what I do about intersex stuff if it wasn't for online. But in fact, I think it's quite hard because I've annoyed a lot of people with it as well. So, and not just like it's I think obviously I've annoyed like trans and queer activists because I
Yeah.
go against what they say, but I've equally annoyed feminists on the other side by asking questions about what they're saying too.
Mm.
I think I think I'm just really annoying. I think that's.
Maybe that's my problem too. But it's interesting because the trans rights queer activists, and by that I just have to say over and over again, there are transsexuals and then there are activists, and the activists they act as though they represent all of this group, but that's not the case. I'm talking
Yeah.
about certain people over here who are activists. They use intersex to forward their agenda, right? And then I'm sure that you've seen that when you come up and go against that, people use your work or they use your voice to forward their own agenda. So we're always, if you are making something of value, or if there's a certain way in which some parts of my product are very useful for conservatives, very useful for gender critical people, very useful in certain respects for these different groups. But me myself, I'm putting out different content, and some other content will be actually work against these different groups on these different ways. Have you watched your material go in these different directions, and how do you feel about watching that happen? You just like let it go and
There's not a lot you can do, is there? And it's really difficult. And it's one of the things, again, like, the purity politics of feminism, and there's the discussion of, like, like the feminists being funded by the right-wing Heritage Foundation and sort of all of that, and who's your ally. And I've always I think intersex is a little bit different because anyone could be born intersex into any. I know, like, you could say the same about being gay or being trans or whatever as well, but could be born intersex into any family. I can't, like, I couldn't say what I do can't be used by people just because I don't agree with their politics.
Okay.
Like, what would be the point in that?
Yeah. It's inherently anti-political or apolitical, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, to the best, obviously I have like my own political leanings and those will like influence what I do, but I can't then, I can't try to take it away from someone because they might have opinions that I don't agree with on another matter. But it's kind of all for the better because there's so little information out there that there's a bit of me that's just grateful when anybody shares like anything, just because it's like taking it a step further. Someone else will read it and they might share it, and someone else might read it and they might share it. But yeah, I think that does make it slightly different because it isn't politics. So
it almost, in a way, it uses politics to be disseminated. It uses people's political engagement. The information itself is just in this political container. So you look beyond that container. You can let go of that container in and of itself.
And it's not mine. Once I put the information out there, it's not my information, is it? It's public. And I have been known to disagree with. I've seen people share my work who think they're on my side and then have used it in a way that I've not agreed with, and I have tackled them over it as much as I would anyone who thinks they're not on my side as well. I don't have a problem saying to people that's not what I meant. But again, people will they'll either listen to that or they won't they? I can't. I can't make them agree with me. But again, hence I've annoyed people on both sides because I don't always agree. One of the things I found quite difficult is when, like, feminists will talk about people like Casta Semenya, because they've become so, this thing of like how trans activists have that, the thing about pronouns, and you can't misgender someone, and then you have and then you get the feminists on the other end who are then like, right, well, I'm using pronouns based on sex from now on, based on how I read someone, and then you get someone like Casta Semenya, the intersex athlete, and she's a woman, she was raised as a girl, and you get the feminists then on that extreme end using male pronouns for Casta, which is not fair. She's not, that's not her battle, and it's not something really that we should be taking away from her. It's a different story.
Yeah.
And I've seen people share. I wrote a blog about Castor Semenya a while back, and I've seen women share it and call Castor he, and I've like just said I don't agree, and I don't agree with it being used that way. But if they're going to use it that way, they're going to use it that way. I would hope that my writing was clear and spoke for itself.
That is a very that case in and of itself really highlights the difficulty of intersex as a category, and I can see why that kind of adds fuel to the queer theorists that want to demolish all categories, because they can use that particular case to stretch or to defy the category of what's a female in with regards to what in female sports. And at the same time, it highlights the failure of certain forms of gender critical activism to allow for the porousness of a boundary, to say, yeah, there are things that are gray. It's not all black and white, So
Yeah.
it really plays into that contention there.
It's there's a reason she has become like the poster child for trans inclusion in sport without actually being trans herself, because she's quite easy, and I think as well, like she's an easy target for the extreme sort of feminists, because she doesn't have the backing of the trans lobby either. For all they'll use her, you can call her a man on Twitter. You're not going to get banned for it because she's not trans. There's not the same protection for her either. So I think she's like a gateway drug. I think I've referred to her before for people like that's how they sort of view her, right? Like the trans activists think, oh, if she's allowed, then we should be allowed. And then the extreme feminists think, oh, if we can exclude her, then we can exclude them. She's become like this gateway.
Yeah, this wedge issue or hedge issue or something like that.
Yeah.
Huh. Have you, so when you did you get any training in queer theory or any of the postmodernist kind of stuff? And or have you only interacted with it online by the way it's?
I've read, since getting involved in this, I've gone and read some essays and things, but I haven't, I have, oh God, it sounds like I'm bragging. I don't mean to, but I have 2 degrees. One of them is in primary education and one of them is in law. So they're quite practical. They're not they're not sort of I know law is like politics, but it's not political theory in that way, or like a type of ideology or anything. So I don't all of my academic knowledge is really practical in that regard. I don't.
Are you saying that queer theory isn't practical?
A little bit, maybe, yeah. So I didn't know a lot about it, and I didn't to use the lingo. I'm a cis het white woman. So what I know I have a DSD, but I'd never I wouldn't have considered myself queer because of that or anything. So I until I got involved in this, it never even occurred to me that queer politics queer theory might have anything to do with me. And then but also it's tended to be the things I have read. Most of it has been to do with the intersex stuff and just trying to understand, unpick that. But then I've read other things. Once you go down a rabbit hole, you can't. Other things come your way, don't they? But I can't claim to have a proper academic understanding of queer theory.
Well, my question would have been: have you found anything useful in it? With regards to communication styles or arguments or philosophy or anything that translates into practical?
Not really, only in as much as I sometimes use some of their things back on them, which is awful. Yeah. No, other than that, no. And that's not something I'm proud of that I want to take forward with me,
Yeah. So you make your arguments based on what? What would you say? They're based on biology, based on a certain form of just rational, straightforward.
I think a lot of it is a lot of it's biology. I've had to read a lot of science papers, but a lot of it is also, I think, just through experience and observing the world. Like I don't have a grounding in feminist theory either. Again, I've gone and read some feminist stuff since getting involved in this. But I can look at where there is inequality, like, because we all have eyes. Yeah, I think I would sort of say most of it's just based on like my understanding of like inequality and how the world works, and then with some science thrown in, because it has to be. How else am I going to explain people's medical conditions if I'm not reading like biology books and medical texts?
Yeah. Is there like have you found or connected with or participated in the building of an intersex lobby or group of that sort, or is there a lobby, and then how does that get politicized? How does that?
It's really, within intersex people, there are queer activists. It would be incorrect to say that every intersex person agrees with me. They don't.
Yeah.
So the queer activists tend to be involved in the politics. And then it's almost like there's two, I would call it more DSD activism, which is involved in like patient-centered activism, making sure that people get the support they need. My involvement would be more with like the DSD. What I do has become politicized because that's where things are. But I'm not generally I don't think politics have any answers actually for intersex people. I don't think that's not what we need. I've worked with, or I am worked with is probably a grand term, but there are DSD organisations that I speak with regularly, and that I help with things where I can, or that I go to for advice when I need it. We're not really a political lobby, because that's just not. We need people need like good quality information about their medical diagnosis that's in a language that they understand. They need psychological support to come to terms with it. We're not going to get those things sitting in a meeting with the UN. That's not that's not where that's going to come from. So it's not really.
Because it's such a quantifiable and strictly a medical, or the ways in which the medical field interacts with this condition are pretty much straightforward. There's not a lot of weird. It's not something that you identify with.
Yeah, no, they're measurable, observable medical conditions. We know they exist. They're diagnosed. The sort of when people tend to politicize the intersex stuff, it's about the surgeries on the babies.
Yeah. Okay.
But the problem, I see, again, this is where you get like the identity politics thing. The problem with that is that then it tends to be more like the queer theorists then that try to push for legislation. But the problem you have then is you've got these queer theorists sitting in front of politicians spouting all this nonsense about sex spectrums and queer babies and just things like that. And then following them, you're going to get doctors who are going to go in and talk to those politicians, who are going to talk in like real world terms, and the politicians aren't going to listen to the queer theorists because it's not going to make sense to them. And then they're going to have these people who are obviously going to know what they're talking about coming in and giving their opinion. And I think like that's why it doesn't go anywhere, because the queer activists aren't making headrows with the intersex stuff, because it.
Well, if the activists can force the politicians to sign some sort of statement saying that they will exclude anybody that disagrees with them, then maybe they'll get their way eventually, right?
Maybe so. We can expel all doctors. But it's just not going to, because the thing is, you're going to get doctors who are going to go, they're going to go and they're going to talk really practically, and they're going to be more nuanced, because it is nuanced, because you're talking about 40 odd medical conditions that are all quite rare. Once you're talking about surgeries, you're down to even like the rarest of the rare. It doesn't apply to all of us, like this decision making. And a lot of those decisions are so unique. And so once you get like a doctor explain that to politicians then going to go, well, you can't legislate for that. Because how do you write a law that allows like that decision to be made in that case, but not in that case? It's a bit different, isn't it, to expelling all the transphobes? I can't believe they wrote that, expel the transphobes.
It was very stunning and brave of them.
It was. It was.
So what was it about the video clip that you that piqued your interest, or that you wanted to say
I
that you couldn't say on Twitter?
I really agree with her, to be honest. I find it really uncomfortable if I'm in a feminist setting and it becomes really man-hating. I find that really uncomfortable. And it's something I've questioned in feminist sort of online discussions, like misandry. Misandry is like a dirty word in some feminist circles. You're not allowed to say it because it doesn't exist, because it can't exist. You know, but like it's a bit like the whole like black people can't be racist kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, of course, women can't be like sexist. But I think it's something that needs addressing. And I think I've often thought that like men, there are things within feminism that actually do benefit men as well. And having men as part of the conversation is really bloody useful, because it is good for them too. And if you could get that on board and you can have conversations. And I hate the whole thing of, you know, the minute like a man disagrees, then like he's a misogynist, or like he's talking over a woman, or mansplaining or whatever. And like we're not. I hate the idea that I'm not robust enough to have a man disagree with me. Really, really offends me. I can like stand by my own opinion, and I find it quite it's not liberating, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. And is that kind of an attitude that you apply over and over again to political movements? Like you have a sensitivity when some movement or some portion of a movement is taking away your agency, or, you know, infantilizing you in some way or another? Is that?
Yeah, I think because it's important to be able to have your own thought, isn't it? I don't want to be part of a hive mind. I don't. I want to be able to always say, like, if I don't agree with something, or if something doesn't look right to me, I want to always be able to say, and I could be wrong. I should be able to say it, and people should be able to disagree with me too. That's fine. But you've got to be able to ask the question, or you've got to be able to make the point, or, and I think it's interesting. I've had a few discussions with women who've come to feminism through like the trans debate. So again, not versed in the academic feminism, and how they can feel quite excluded by a lot of that as well, because they don't understand it, or they don't buy into it, or again, it's not their experience of the world. This, you know, like I think there's an overuse of words, isn't there, as well? Like I find it quite difficult when I'm told that I'm oppressed, and I know some of my friends who are feminists get really annoyed with me because I'm there going, I'm not oppressed, but women are oppressed, but I'm not. You know, and it's really, yes, you could look at the class and we can talk about how there are women all around the world who face oppression because they are women, but I am not oppressed. And it doesn't mean I don't have like a class analysis of where that is happening. But
okay.
But to apply that to all of us is just really, it's not accurate, and I think it's offensive to people who are oppressed for a start, because I'm not, and so how can I be compared to them? But offensive to me as well to suggest that I'm not like operating with my own agency or my own thoughts, or that I have no autonomy. There's if that was the case.
Yeah, there's a moment in the Evergreen documentary, or just like in What Happened at Evergreen, where a student of color yells at the other students of color, "I'm not oppressed," and they all jump on her. And they're like,
yes, I've seen that.
They just like, no, you can't see it. We're always oppressed all the time. People like you. That's why we're doing this. And you know, they're going after her professor. It's this weird moment where they all just start ripping this girl apart that just says, I'm not oppressed.
I'm not oppressed. Yeah. And like, not that I don't face. There are areas of my life, sure, where being a woman will impact on me. So, might I face sex-based discrimination? Yes, of course I might. But does that make me oppressed? No, it doesn't make me oppressed. Because people can be discriminated against all the time for all sorts of things. But that's not oppression. Oppression is something quite specific, isn't it? And I think your point about the infantilizing as well. I hate that. I think there is the cloak of perpetual victimhood that you have to have in so many like identity politics type circles, where like the defining feature of your group is how oppressed you are as a group, or like what victims you are as a group. And again, I don't identify with that. I don't like no part of me identifies with that. And I don't think I'm particularly privileged either, necessarily,
Yeah. It's difficult to keep that. It's kind of like a Pandora's box situation where like the victim narrative is very powerful, but once it starts to scale, it's very disastrous, because then you have a bunch of people competing over victimhood and gets really ridiculous really quick. And I'm considering right now, and I'm thinking through how in America, the progressive movement is suffering a sustained loss in the Democratic primary, where you have their champion, which is Bernie Sanders, slowly being eroded by the establishment candidate Biden. And I'm wondering, well, what's going to happen to the progressives? What's going to happen to these people who, this array of people who there's some bad actors in there and there's some really good actors in there. There's a spectrum of people. How are they going to translate their politic? How are they going to grow beyond this? Because it seems like one defining feature of that movement is that they're standing up for the oppressed, which is a great thing to do. But because they blame everything, and this is my critique, because they blame everything on the billionaires, and there's always that background radiation of blaming something else. So whenever they fail, there's this really easy way to not look at what you're doing wrong, because you already have.
It's an inability to self-criticize, isn't it? To go back to the general election in the UK last year, it was an absolutely devastating loss for the Labour Party, but it was everyone's fault but theirs. And they're still writing about it now. You will still find op-eds in all the lefty newspapers with them wringing their hands over how it's the racists' fault, or Trump's fault, or like Brexit's fault, and at no point have they done any self-reflection and said, "Oh, no one wanted to vote for us, so like maybe we were not appealing." And it. Yeah, I think but again, I think I think it is collective narcissism. I think that's the term for it, where you experience it's to do with like your identity as a group, and where
it's unassailable in some way.
Yeah, and I think I wrote a blog about this a while back. Actually, it was criticising feminism, not transactivism. Well, I wrote a blog about collective narcissism, and I'd read about it, and it did remind me a lot of because where there's an injury to one, it becomes injury to the whole group. So everyone then is oppressed by the bad thing that happened to this one person, like that kind of thing. And then I wrote a follow up to it. It was sort of about feminism. It was. Do you remember when the social network Spinster? It's on the Fediverse type thing. It's like it's like Twitter for feminists, and they started it, and I was banned from Twitter, and a lot of people were asking me to join. And then I found out that there were men who had joined who had then been hounded off the site for being men, and there were trans people who joined who were hounded off the site for being trans people, and I wrote a blog post saying I wouldn't join because I didn't like. God, I was going to say the exclusionary atmosphere, but that sounds so like social justicey. But I didn't like that. I had no interest in being part of an echo chamber, and I based it on do you know the story of the 5 monkeys?
No, could you tell us?
I've heard it before. Yeah. So there's 5 monkeys in a room, and at the top of the room, in the room, there's a set of stairs, and at the top of the stairs there's a banana. And one of the monkeys one day goes to climb the stairs to get the banana, and all the monkeys are sprayed with jets of cold water. So the monkey comes back down the stairs and doesn't have the banana. And then
all the monkeys are sprayed with
jets of cold water.
Okay.
And so, and then the next day, another monkey goes to climb the stairs, and again they're all sprayed with these jets of cold water. And then eventually they remove one monkey and they put another monkey in. And that monkey doesn't know that if you try to climb the stairs to get the banana, you'll get sprayed with water. So the monkey goes to climb the stairs to get the banana. And of course, all the monkeys who know turn on this monkey to stop it from climbing the stairs because they don't want to spray him with the water.
Yeah.
And then they replace another monkey and the same thing happens, and another monkey and the same thing happens, and another monkey. And then eventually you end up with 5 monkeys who've never been sprayed with water but don't climb the stairs because you'll be attacked by the group if you climb the stairs. But none of them know why. None of them will ever have the banana, but none of them know why. And I kind of like equated it to that. And I think a lot of like the social justice or like the identity politic groups, I think like they're like those, like they're like the 5th monkey. Like, you know, that they're all nobody knows why, but it's all bad.
Yeah. No, there's that collective trauma response can perpetuate way beyond the original offense, and it becomes enshrined or mythologized in the group behavior, and it's almost has this religious factor to it, where there's this holiest of holies, where God is, or that which we converge on is, and it doesn't matter anymore what that is which we originally converged upon, because we're converging now, and that, so you know, like the original tablets of the 10 Commandments can be completely just dust and even leak out of that box, but because Israel, you know, just the biblical metaphor, because that group is all around it sustains, and it sustains the group over and over again.
Yeah, I think like you get God, it's going to sound like I'm just bad mouthing feminism. Like, I don't like, not that I do think it does good, but like you can get a lot in some feminist groups where people are doing, you know, it's like this, like talk about like your worst trauma type thing, or like everyone talks about like how badly abused they've been, or like it's and like again, there is room for those discussions. Don't get me wrong. But it does become like this competition, and like you have to have been, I don't know, like catcalled on the street, or you have to have been sexually harassed, or abused in some way, or
in a way, trauma becomes initiation. Then, if you have a trauma, then you can be on the inside, and which reinforces the way in which trauma is the founding principle of a group, and again, it's not necessarily about feminism. This is group politics. This is how this is group psychology. This is how things form, and why I end up being very critical of progressivism insofar as it is based on victimization and oppression. And you have to be really careful when you're dealing with oppression, because if you start a group called anti-oppression, the most important thing isn't the anti, it's the oppression, and you're going to be looking for the oppression, and the oppression is going to be the collective value, not just being against the oppression.
You have to have, it's the thing of having to have something to fight against, isn't it? I think this is, you know, you can see it in like the LGBT, I think is a really good illustration of that, especially, I don't know so much in America, but I know like here in the UK. So like Stonewall, you know, the big charity that is now very trans oriented, was originally an LGBT charity, and its focus was, you know, gay rights, equal marriage, that kind of thing. And when they achieved that, what did they have left? What was left for them to do? They had achieved all the things that they'd set out to achieve, and that's why they then took on trans, because then trans was the new most oppressed who needed a new law that they could utilize. I think so. You're always looking for the downtrodden, isn't it? Or I don't, is that the word?
Which is weird, because I'm not against looking for and uplifting the downtrodden. Actually, a lot of my work, if you kind of squint, you can see that I'm actually trying to platform people that are marginalized constantly, because I find that interesting. But I try to do it in such a way that it's not about their trauma. It's not about the oppression. It's about what does this person learn from this? How has this person grown from these experiences? There's a subtle way in which my progressivism and my liberalism tries to, you know, move the chair again, tries to distance itself from that toxifying echo chamberish certain aspects of it. And then when I do and I criticize these groups or I present inconvenient instances against these groups, I have to expect a certain amount of backlash. But over and over again, whenever I do get backlash, there's a lot of people from that group that agree with me and that support me, because there's a lot of people in the group that are more into self-reflection, more into criticism, because they understand that without criticism and self-reflection, they can't actually do a really good job at what they're trying to do.
I was quite surprised when I started, because when I first got involved in the gender stuff, I wasn't particularly having the feminist conversations. But then I remember on my Twitter account, the first time I criticised what was kind of the feminist view, or some of the main like feminist representatives, and being really nervous and just thinking, well, this is it, like everyone will hate me now because I've just gone against everything completely. And I remember being really surprised actually by the support that was for it, because a lot of people thought like that, but a lot of people were scared of saying it. But again, it's like the fifth monkey, isn't it? Everyone's scared of the other monkeys attacking them. That's the problem. It's I don't think it's that people don't self-reflect. I think it's that people are scared to admit that they have a lot of the time.
Yeah, or the loud voices are really good at performing something that it looks more effective than it actually is, with regards to backlash or policing or mobbing, all these different things that don't really matter, give the effect, the side effect of this movement. Let's just say feminism isn't about being against men. It's not at all. But certain aspects of it have been co-opted by people that are totally fine to write those op-eds that appear in the New York Times about why it's okay to hate men, and take the feminist brand and then drag it through the mud unintentionally, really counteract some of the really great work that it's doing. And so it's really important to always be saying not all feminists, not all men, not all this, not all that,
Yeah, I think it's true. I think, and I think it's really disappointing when feminism becomes reduced to being anti-men. But because I think there probably are anti-men activists, I think they are. But it's always better to be for something, isn't it, than against something. Mm-hmm. I think that's the point. So, for me, feminism that is for the advancement of women, and not the advancement of women to a point of superiority over men, but the advancement of women where they are, where they might need a leg up, or where they are facing inequality. I think that's fine. But feminism that's just against something, it's just against men, or I don't know. I don't really understand the patriarchy, to be honest. I keep trying to understand the patriarchy, but I don't get it. But I find that sort of quite anti something as well, kind of. I feel a bit like you can. And again, not everyone who, because I probably don't understand a lot of academic feminism, so I don't necessarily mean it as criticism of some academic feminism that maybe I don't understand. But I find like you end up with like a conspiracy theory as well, kind of like all the men have got together to have a meeting against us or something, and that's obviously not what has happened, and it overlooks where women can be arseholes too, because they can be. We're not perfect creatures. We're not incapable of causing like harm ourselves. We're not always the victims. God, it's just it's identity politics.
Even be in a group. Do you feel lonely, like not being able to have that access to that kind of community, or?
I don't know if I've ever really fitted in a group, so I don't know how much that bothers me. I mean, I think last time I fitted in I think like a good example, I was raised Catholic, and I remember saying to my mum when I was about 6 or 7 years old that I wasn't afraid of death because it didn't matter, because when you died, you didn't know about it. And my mum, like, being properly like, all these years we've been like indoctrinating you, and like this is what you've come up with. So I think like I don't think I've ever really belonged to a group. I don't think I have, and I don't mean that in like a I'm not like other people kind of thing. I just think that's just not how. It's obviously just not how my brain operates. Yeah, I just have my own thoughts about things.
Yeah, and you're fine with being annoying to everybody.
Yeah, why not?
Claire, I have to. What?
What about you though? Because you're not in it. Do you miss like having a group?
Well, I asked that question because I was interviewed last week, and somebody asked me that, like, aren't you lonely because you're standing against this group and that group, or what about these people who don't fit into these different groups, and the loneliness that they might feel? And I think I'm like you, and a lot of the people that I end up really wanting to talk to are people who are really independent, and there's some quality that I haven't even been able to formulate questions to investigate, but there's like a consistent theme in the people that I really enjoy having on my channel. Like, for instance, the detransitioned young woman, Helena, I had her back on because I saw her attacking gender critical feminists and trans rights activists, just going back and forth. Like, I don't want to be a part of any of your group. Like, you guys are a bunch of, like, I'm not going to go from one cult to another. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And the question is, like, what is it about that kind of person how do we describe that kind of person? How do we make that kind of person not the ideal, because we're even against ideals, because there's something about that in me. And I was thinking about how I moved from one school to another school throughout all grade school. And I didn't finish a whole year of school until 6th grade, which is the worst time because that's when I landed in a school full of assholes, but like, so I was always being broken from my community over and over and over again. And my parents were involved in a cult when I was very young, and I saw the effect of that had on their psychology and how they had to work through that, work out of that. And so even though I went to church constantly and there was a lot of things, I was never anti-church or anti-God until later on in life. I always accepted the doctrine, but the collectivism I was always against, and especially if the pastor started saying certain things that would start to create a collective, I was always against that, and I would always call that out, even from a young age. Like, whenever somebody would say, "Oh, this is what the Bible says, don't question it," I would even when I was like 6th grade, I would tie up the Sunday school teacher in knots by asking them the questions where they would break down, because I can't stomach that stuff. So when I ended up at Evergreen and I saw that happening again, but on a political level, using racism and using the gender issue to kind of create an inside and an outside, and that insularity, and just like feeling so claustrophobic, where I just have to hold my breath.
Do you think it's like there's just a natural thing in some people that they can't, like there's like physical personal space, but there's also like like an intellectual or personal space, psychic almost space. Of like, like, so, if you're pushing into that, then something's probably wrong, and I need to work out what that's about. I think maybe it's that. Maybe we just have a really good personal space, or maybe we have personal space issues. I don't know.
No, yeah, I've said before, like, people are like, you want to hang out, or like, why don't you have any friends? I'm like, I have a rich internal life. Like, plenty of friends.
I am totally fine in my own company. It's like it's no hardship to me. I've got lots to think about. It's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, we have to wrap up because I have to get to work. But is there anything that you can share with what you're doing right now, or where you're at with your online project?
I can't really talk. I can't name it in person.
Okay.
I can't even think of a way. I can't even think of a sneaky way to do it. I've not worked that out yet.
Yeah, that's fine.
But thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Tempting you?
Yeah. It's so frustrating. It's so frustrating. And like people know it's me. Because I think I'm quite obvious as well. I just can't openly be me. But I get DMs all the time from people going, I know exactly who this is. And even like the trans activists, like within like 2 days, it sussed me out. But yeah, I just
that
can't.
is specifically because a certain internet company has decided to side with people who are against you, and
Yeah. Yeah.
have made you a persona non grata,
Yeah.
which you
Very
were
much.
fine with being with to begin with.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. But I still want to be on that platform, which is really unfortunate. Not to be in a club, but just because
Yeah.
well, where else are you going to go? There is no equivalent to it, unfortunately. Otherwise, I wouldn't
like
go there.
with Spinster, whenever there's these alternative networks, the antipode to Spencer would be Gab. You go over to Gab, and it's a bunch of really extreme ethno-nationalists and some really seedy stuff and really dark, icky things. I'm like, I don't want to be over here, And
Yeah.
so it's like,
Yeah, Spinster works on the same, because it's the Fediverse, so it works on the same thing as Gab. So you can see Gab from Spinster.
oh, okay,
It's like on its own, like all the other, there's Gab, and look, I don't really know what a lot of the others are, but they're all like there. And you could sort of wander onto that tab, and it's just like this horror show of like all the worst thoughts that could be happening.
It's so weird. I mean, I understand. Like, I toy with free speech absolutism, but at the same time, I heavily edit what I expose myself to online because it affects me negatively psychologically. So I appreciate that stuff is gated from me, but at the same time, like whenever the gatekeeper makes a mistake or starts to encroach more and more, like I'm against that. I appreciate filters, but at the same time, when people like you are consumed by the filter, I have to stand up against it. So there's a lot of gray area in that gray area.
It's really difficult, isn't it? I think free speech online is a great example of where we haven't sussed that yet. We haven't worked out how that works. Because yes, there are things that people do need protecting from, and not even in like a nanny state kind of thing, but I mean, just even like obvious extreme examples like child pornography and things like that. There are things that people need protecting from. But how do you balance that with something that really we have so little control? And I don't want to end up. I lived in China for a year. I know what restricted internet access is like, and I don't want to end up with that either. There's got to be a happy medium between the two, hasn't there?
Yeah. What level of threat is the UK under with regards to Corona right now?
I don't know. They can't decide. I don't think at the moment. We've got quite a few cases, but I think we've only had one death, and nothing's shut down yet. Okay. So we're not Italy, which I think is they've just shut down, haven't they?
Yeah.
But there's talk of the NHS maybe stopping some elective procedures so they can like take stock and prepare for if the worst happens. I don't know. It's one of those things. I was talking to my housemate about it this morning and saying to them, it's one of those things that's kind of crept up on me because like we had, like you get these things like the SARS and Ebola and bird flu and swine flu that we've had in the past. And like they all sort of turn out to be like a storm in a teacup. And I think when this first started, I was a bit kind of, it's just gonna be another one of those. And then like suddenly it's a lot more serious and I haven't really kept up to it as much as I probably should have done. I'm just vaguely aware of things happening.
I think it's, with all due respect to the severity of the potential problem of it, I think it's fascinating how it's going to affect our psychology to have that existential threat there, and how our various different discussions and discourses and echo chambers are going to converge on that apocalypse, whether it's a potential or not. And it's growing in potential, to be actually sizable. So it's just, I'm really interested in how it's affecting the way I look at the world and how it's going to end up affecting other people's view of the world, just on a psychological narrative level.
Yeah, it's, I I think part of the thing for Brits is that we're quite good in a crisis. To be fair,
Oh, really?
it is a sort of well, we had there's the whole thing of like the Blitz spirit that that we
Oh,
supposedly
yeah,
have
yeah.
from so that
Keep
kind of
calm and
thing of
carry
like
on.
yeah, and kind of
Yeah.
being ready for things going wrong and then just getting on when things do go wrong. So I think
Hmm.
maybe maybe that's tempering some of it here. That thing of like, we've survived worse in the past, so this will be fine, surely. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know, maybe, but then also, I mean, like, because everything with Brexit and everything else that's happening here, well, that it's happened now. It just gets involved in all of that as well, just the whole like, oh, it's all we needed, isn't it? First we had Brexit, and now we've got this killer virus. Um,
Always
I
something
mean,
for the pundits to.
yeah, I need to find someone sensible. I think I'm quite lucky because of my online stuff. I follow a lot of medical accounts anyway, so I think I'm getting quite
Yeah.
sensible
Yeah.
um, things into my feed about it anyway, and I'm trying to avoid a lot of the hysterical
Yeah.
tabloid headlines about it.
Well, you seem you're set up to be able to just hole up in your room for a couple months. It seems
Yeah,
like you
yeah,
have
I'll
the
be fine.
constitution for that.
Yeah, I'll be totally fine. If I have to quarantine myself, I mean, it's like heaven anyway, isn't it? I don't have to deal with other people.
I'm openly the same. I identify as a hermit crab too. All right, Claire, I got a jet. Thanks so much for reaching out and coming on the show again. It's always great to
No
have you
worries.
here.
It's always lovely to talk to you, Benjamin. And I'll speak to you soon.
All right, talk to you soon.
All right, bye.
Congratulations for reaching the end of the podcast. If you enjoyed this product, consider donating to this channel via paypal.me/Benjamin Boyce or joining me on Patreon. Also follow me on Twitter at Benjamin A. Boyce. Have a good night.